The flow front continues to be fairly inactive at the very leading edge. What we saw last night through the night continued this morning, and as recent as this afternoon, very little to no activity on the very leading edge in front of the flow. What we are seeing though is just back from the leading edge along the flanks or the margins of the flow is activity with breakouts. As noted on the map, like we showed yesterday, this being the leading edge, furthest or closest to the whole village roadway, still 480 feet from the roadway. Breakouts along the margins here within the property, as well as further upslope. This particular breakout just above the private property area in the forest line was fairly active, advancing at about 5 meters per hour. And that's been fairly consistent in this area over the last 24 hours, what we were seeing last night. Further upslope above Upon Street or Cemetery Road here, this was the breakout that was moving in the direction of the transfer station. Again, very sluggish, very little activity there, very little advancement at all. But it is still active with burning on the edges, but again, very minimal, as well as breakouts along the south flank. So at this point, the flow hasn't advanced any closer to the community than it's been, but there is activity. We're also watching another lobe or breakout further up slope that is moving to the northeast. And again, I apologize maybe on the quality, and we'll work on this going forward because we'd like to give you as much good information to include, you know, some of the what we're seeing on the ground. So this is on the top corner of the property, right here, where we're seeing the active burning and some of the breakout moving. This is that structure that we've been referring to over the last several days that was possibly going to be affected by this advancing finger here that has stopped or stalled. The closest it came was within about 100 feet of the structure, but again, it's not moving anywhere near it, stalled, no advancement along this margin here. But they're watching the activity up here because there was a little bit of a breakout moving across in this direction to the south, which could turn and then come and affect this home. It's a very small two-story structure, but that's what we've been referring to. The farm structure that burned is right in this corner here. And again, it was a one-room, small, maybe a dwelling at one time, but converted into a potting shed that was being used for agricultural purposes. So the flow is, again, this is the flow pad moving down towards Pahol Village Road. Some of the pictures you might see is additional breakouts. And then with the transfer station, this is the pad that's moving, or the finger that was moving towards the transfer station, still about 25 feet from their fence line, which comes up through here. But as you can see, very little activity there. It still is active by the burning, but not advancing at this time. This is the breakout that's further upslope, about 2 miles, Janet, roughly. This, the one that's off the map here. Yeah, it's about 2 miles upslope, pulling to the northeast. And again, you can see it's not a very aggressive, fast moving. We estimate since yesterday it moved about 200 yards in the 24-hour period. So that's what it's looking like, about 2 miles upslope. But any questions for me?
Yes, Daryl?
Yes.
In reference to the berm,
Yes.
and what we spoke about last week about like environmental hazards and tire burns and stuff in front of the burn, I know there was a lot of concern about the old gas station. After looking at some aerial photos, it seems to the southeast of the berm, I don't know if it's on the same property as the berm, there's a rather large, I mean, I see a lot of equipment, I imagine he's using that to help build his berm. But I see a lot of, like, looks like, I don't know if they're old propane tanks or water tanks. I do see quite a bit of tires and additional debris scattered around. You can see there's cars without tires on it there. I know it's not fair to put the homeowners through all the additional things like that. Is there anything that the state, county, or any federal is looking to do to help with those cleanups?
Well, we're definitely working with him. We're on his property every day, and what he's done since the start of the flow, you know, with the exception of the tires, he's moved everything that he could move out of the way using what, I guess, equipment he has on his property. We're very fortunate. He's a contractor, so he does have access to heavy equipment. So he's been moving a lot of things out of the flow path. Currently, where it's at, where it's the flow pad itself, he's moved everything. So we're going to continue to work with him if he needs some assistance, which he says he's pretty much got it under control. But as far as the tanks, many of the tanks are empty. Many of the vehicles, as you point out, are disabled. So he's doing whatever he can to move them out of the way, and we're prepared to assist them in any way we can.
Is there any way that the county can just kind of like supersede somebody saying they're going to do the most they can and not force them into, but like the county just step up and help them with that?
It's possible. I think we're working with him on watching what the flow does. If it looks like it's going to continue to widen on that side, if you again, I apologize, you haven't been on his property.
No,
It
but
is,
I did an aerial, so
yeah.
I seen yesterday.
You might have saw that the grade on that side of his property, the elevation, it slopes up.
Yep.
He moved everything to an uphill position on his property, try to move it out of the way. So we're watching the flow and then again closely with HVO how it would move following that path of steepest descent. It would appear at this time that where he put it is out of the way of the flow movement, but we know that the flow can widen, so we're going to continue to work with him.
Is it getting much wider and taller? Because we know that yesterday what was upslope was starting to inflate a little bit more. What's the rate of inflation now, or how tall is the flow gotten? Maybe
Rate of inflation, maybe Janet might want to.
Hi there again, Janet Babb, the USGS Hawaiian Volcano Observatory. So as far as the inflation, the flows are still around 2 to 3 meters thick because of the inflation of the flow. You know, the leading edge is much thinner, but back up slope a little bit, it can be up to 2 to 3 meters thick.
Is the expectation that it's going to get taller, or is it going to be more breakouts, or what are we anticipating, at least in the short term?
Right. Well, in the short term, I think we're already seeing what we normally expect with Pahoehoe flows, in that they will stall and inflate, and then you get breakouts along the margin of the flow. So it's pretty typical Pahoehoe behavior that we're seeing now.
And at this point as well, I know we're sort of like at the same point we were yesterday, so it's like not really knowing exactly when that inflation rate will, you know, I guess push the flow forward when it reaches a certain volume or mass. Or
Right, right. So you've heard the DI events, the deflation inflation events. So the DI event turned to inflation yesterday afternoon late, and so typically it's a day or two, maybe 3 after we see the turnaround to inflation that we might see some effect at the flow front. So we're watching carefully.
Hey, Gerald, I know some plans have been put in place for voters and an alternate polling place in case the lava had crossed Highway 130. Given that it doesn't appear that to be happening, what do you anticipate for Election Day as far as the impact of this?
At the current flow position, its advancement, its activity, it would appear we could move forward with the election under normal schedules and plans. But our election office with the county has been in direct contact with us. We're sharing them information every day, and they have contingencies to include backup power at other sites, a number of different things, so that we can allow for the election process to move forward with no interruption.
There are two unrelated questions. First is, we've talked about 25 feet to the fence line of the transfer station. Can you give us an estimate of how far it is from the actual building?
One of the things to keep in mind is there's actually a drainage between here and the building, so that may provide some form of a stop or a speed bump if the flow was to continue. But the distance here from this particular corner here to the building is about 100 yards.
100 yards.
Yeah.
And this morning about the person that was posing as a government employee, any update on that? Any update on trespassers or any?
You know, that was the only incident that we're aware of, so we're fortunate for that, or grateful for that. And the police department says they haven't substantiated, haven't found anyone, so they're still investigating. And again, thank you folks for getting the word out about that, because we want the citizens to know that if it's a government official that's coming to their property, they will have an official government ID.
So there are no official evacuation orders in place at the moment?
Not at this time, no. What we've done is we've issued the residents an evacuation notice and advisory, and that is putting them on notice that as things evolve or change, then we'll be coming back door to door and say, you may be in the flow path, it'd be advisable, you should be prepared. The one thing this community has done is a tremendous job with preparing for this. The residents that are within that area, this particular corridor from the Post Office Road to Apa'a Street, they have been working very hard and preparing for this. So when we've gone door to door over the last weeks multiple times, the common message given to us is we're ready, we're just hoping it doesn't happen.
I heard some people who describe themselves as disabled or on disability or something, their doctors are saying that they should leave because it's more difficult for them to get assistance. Can you talk about that a little bit?
What we've been sharing with the community, both from their physicians as well as the Department of Health, is that if in the event the flow was to continue, it would cross the village road and cross the Pahoa bypass or the highway. At that point, the access roads that have been constructed, Railroad Avenue and Beach Road, will provide access, but it will not be an easy task getting access to healthcare. So the message that has been put forth to the community is anyone who is dependent upon routine, regular access to healthcare, consider relocation if possible outside of the area that could be isolated. Not mandatory, but consider it, because services may be difficult to get to. Not necessarily 911 services, because those will be in place, but routine healthcare, diagnostic, going to a lab, may not be as easy as it is today.
And along those lines, Daryl, can you sum up the contingencies the county has in place for emergency response when the lava flow does cross the highway?
Well, right now, what you've seen in place as of today, the fire station is operational in the Pahoa Village. It's based out of the old fire station, which is right in this complex here, adjacent to the community center. So they are operational with a full complement of personnel and equipment, including an ambulance and a emergency response vehicle. The police department, along with the Hawaii National Guard, has set up a satellite or a base of operations down at the Puna Geothermal Venture Plant on their property. So there is a strong and, I want to say, resilient force here on the ground of all the public safety services available.
So should people be concerned about emergency response if they're on the sort of cutoff side of the flow?
No, because the same level of services that they're receiving now will be in place if and when the flow crosses the roadway.
Daryl, following up on that, could you expand upon what crew and the level of service that is now being based at the Puna Geothermal Plant?
I couldn't speak to the numbers. I know that with the National Guard, we have 83 troops on the ground. They're covering a series of shifts, 20 guardsmen per shift, in addition to the complement of police officers that the chief is already reassigned to this area.
Daryl, to get back to the people who might have to evacuate because of the fact that they are breathing and there are medical reasons they can't get across the road. I know some of those are elders. Is the county helping them with like the Department of Aging or anything like that? Because I know there's quite a waiting list for people to get into some of these housing facilities. Or is the county helping and assisting those folks? And is there any way that they can kind of get bumped to the top of the list if they do have to evacuate their house?
Well, not so much with the housing, but as far as assisting with getting out and going to a shelter and then transitioning to some other accommodations, the Office of Aging, as well as the Coordinated Services Department for the county, has identified, also along with public health, those that may need assistance with evacuation if that comes down to it. We're also encouraging anybody who needs assistance now to let us know. As you're aware, we have opened up a shelter over the last week, starting on Saturday. We only had one taker on Sunday. So fortunately, the community has prepared. Maybe some of them have relocated, but we are definitely in a position to assist. The Red Cross is keeping crews on standby at night in the event we need to have a shelter or people are asking for it. We will have it open. But for now, we do have services available to help people move if they're going to request that, and if we move into an evacuation.
Some of the feedback I'm getting from some of my mom's friends who belong to the Pahoa Senior Center is, they've been living independent most of their life. And for them to go to a shelter, they would just assume stay somewhere else and stay in harm's way for as long as possible till they get out. It's kind of, to hear the shelter thing, when they keep hearing that, it really makes them feel like uncomfortable and at ease, like they're going to be sleeping on a cot and somebody's going to be snoring next to them. So would there be a way for the county and the Department of Aging to kind of reach out to them more and maybe make them feel more at ease and like they not keep using the word shelter and maybe use relocation to aging facilities?
Sure, I'll discuss that with those departments that we have and see what better terminology or services that might be available.
Some business owners today who are concerned if and when the flow crosses 130, that any access that would be allowed to Pahoa would be restricted maybe to just residents, and obviously they're very tourism-driven businesses. What are you guys doing to kind of help them and alleviate their fears?
Well, thank you for asking the question, because there's a lot of confusion out there about access and restriction, especially on the social media platforms. There's no intent to restrict access. What we're asking people to consider is that if and when we're dealing or using only the Road Avenue and Beach Road, traffic is going to be difficult. So if people don't need to be in the area, then allow the residents, the businesses, people that need to be in the area have access to those roads. It's going to be congested. We've been preparing the community for that. If not, can they take advantage of some of the public transportation to minimize the number of vehicles on the road? The only discussion of any type of concept of controlled access is the continued conversations we're having with the national park. We definitely respect the park's need to manage their resources and protect their resources in the park, and with having a controlled access at the national park entrance on Volcano Highway, there is some discussion about how would they manage it on the Kalapana, on the Chain of Craters side. And a variety of ideas, and again, I appreciate you bringing the question up. There is no set plan or I'll say procedure in place yet, because we continue to have those discussions with the national park, whether it's decals, stickers, a visor, clip, something that would identify residents versus visitors who may be going into the park. That is yet to be determined, but we're working closely with them to find the best solution that would work for everyone.
But with regard to Pahoa Village Road and the businesses directly on that road, I mean, you do see an impact obviously to business over time because of the congestion and that sort of thing?
Definitely. Unfortunately, I mean, and not to in any way minimize the impact that's going to happen in this area if the flow continues, is that most of the businesses are outside of the forecasted track. So people will just have to use alternate routes to patronize those businesses. And again, we're going to support the businesses as best we can to allow for access.
Darryl, let's talk about that forecasted track for 1 second.
Sure.
What is your estimate for how many homes are in danger, are in probable danger of being destroyed here, and what is the worst case scenario?
Right. If we're looking at just this, what's on the map here, you can physically count the number of homes that are along the blue line, keeping in mind that as the flow moves or advances forward, it can be wider as it continues to move downhill. So you can see, again, you could actually count the number of homes. If it continues on its track and path all the way to the ocean, it'd be difficult to say. But we have very large subdivisions below and outside the frame of this map, Hawaiian beaches, Hawaiian shores. So the potential is large numbers. So again, very difficult to forecast it, but I think we can show you right here that if it stays on its course, the numbers would be relatively small. So far, it's done an amazing thing and avoid any structure with the exception of that one farm building. I'm optimistic and hopeful it might somehow meander through an area and not affect any home, but I'm the optimist. So again, we're going to be watching this, and again, the residents have been coming to the community meetings. They've definitely taken advantage of the explanations from HVO and understand, again, the dynamics of the flow with it widening. So although they may not be on the flow path today, that's uncertain for the future.
Darryl, would your office consider taking the press on a guided tour into that neighborhood? Maybe just reporters, no cameras, so we could see for ourselves the measures that are in place right now.
Sure. We continue to have discussion because we realize how frustrating we're making things, not just for the residents, but for all of you who are trying to get the message out of what's happening here. So we continue to have discussions, and we'll definitely keep you folks informed of any changes. Trust me, we are trying to balance everything, and we do appreciate what job you have, which is passing on the information and keeping the world basically informed of what's happening here. So we're still working on that.
So you're open to that idea, or?
Well, we're trying to see how we can balance that with obviously the privacy and needs of the residents as well. And like I said, safety is always going to be first on the top. Yeah.
Darryl, yesterday there was a lot of discussion about law enforcement efforts given the arrests on Thursday. And there was some discussion about media folks that have gone on, they could possibly face arrest. And there was a lot of talk about social media, people that are posting selfies. I know it's a law enforcement question, but do you know today, has there been much progress in terms of investigation? Do they have people in mind?
Again, my contact with the police department, there hasn't been any indication or information passed my way that they've had any further arrests, any further cases. I'm hoping that with that one case, that's the isolated case, things have maybe changed, people are more compliant, because we don't want to go down there. It's not our intent to make a difficult situation worse by having to take on more enforcement positions, but we're hoping everybody's just going to be cooperative and compliant.
Darryl, can you talk about your staff? I'm sorry, and you guys have been going and going and going around the clock pretty much for days and days. How's everybody doing? How are they feeling? Sort of, this is their community, and they're probably exhausted, right?
Well, again, we have a lot of support here in the community. The Guard's presence has really supported not only the law enforcement, but just the community outreach and minimizing or helping to alleviate a lot of the anxiety. So when they see the troops out there, that makes people feel a lot better. It also allows the personnel that are working to kind of take a break, because again, it's sometimes minimizing some of the problems out there. But the team is working real hard. Everybody's very empathetic of this situation, very committed to this response. We do have support from our state civil defense. We're providing unlimited resources if we need it. So again, we have a great system within the state. The access to additional resources is there. For now, everybody's working hard and is committed, and everybody's holding up well.
Do you feel a sense of resiliency on your team and in the community? Can you talk about that, given that this is like the third big thing that's happened in the last couple?
I would think the focus on that issue of resiliency would be on the community. They've been through a lot. For the responders, yes, we've been working hard and responding to their needs, but they're actually the ones experiencing all of this. And again, it's a testament to this community, how strong they are and what they're doing, coming together. As I shared, I think a few days ago, the community that's presently being forecasted of having impact, the residents all got together for a potluck dinner. So they're all coming together, neighbors helping neighbors, and that's the same thing we saw with Hurricane Isabel and with Anna. Neighbors coming out, helping out one another to get through something like this.
Daryl, this morning on the phone call with the media, there was talk about helicopters flying a little bit too low.
Yes.
Is there anything with the state of the county, the federals are going to increase the distances or maybe speak to the operators of the helicopters?
I've been in direct contact with the operators and asking for their assistance rather than us having to take a more regulatory position. They're very supportive of what we're doing. It's likely that by the end of today I'll have an amendment to our policy. As you know, under the temporary flight restrictions, it's the emergency management organization that controls or regulates or guides the use of the airspace, which is basically state civil defense, but that authority passed on to the county as the on-the-ground agency managing this. Up until now, we've set up a schedule for the aircraft to enter the airspace on 2-hour increments starting at 8 o'clock. So we have 8 o'clock to 10, 10 to 12, 12 to 2. During that 2-hour windows, we're allowing 2 aircraft in the airspace at all times so that they can try to coordinate in and out, get the footage that the media would like to get. And the only challenge we've had so far is with the aircraft coming really low to the ground. So for the safety of personnel, as you know, we've shared it over and over, the HVO is on the ground helping us, as well as we have fire department, police department, some of our state employees on the ground, walking the flow, making sure things are okay. We need to be considerate or concerned about their safety. So it's likely that we'll be setting a ceiling limit by the end of this today as a policy with access. Still provide for a good altitude to get good footage, but to provide some measure of safety for the people on the ground.
So at the time there was no ceiling limit?
Just expecting the operators to follow their visual flight rules and the rules set by FAA.
So Daryl, is Kevin going to be issuing a release when the new TFRs come out?
Yes, I'll be working with him. One of the things we did this morning is we actually worked with one of the operators, asked him to fly into the area with his team. We had him fly at different altitudes to see what would be a good altitude for videography, photography, and what would be on our end a safe altitude for the safety factor. So we're working with the operators on this, and we're going to come up with a number.
Because as a journalist, I push for access and I fight for the right for access, but as a resident, I can tell you that people were not adhering to that 8 a.m. flight time because I was being woken up ahead of time by helicopters, and I know there's a lot of kapuna. Our nerves are on edge. We are helping, we are coming together, but as residents, we've been on edge about that, and I really, so thank you for that, because it's hard. We want access, but we're fried, we're tired, we're stressed, and they're not helping.
Yeah. And just for clarity, the temporary flight restrictions does not exclude them from the total airspace above 4,000 feet. So you can still have aircraft in here outside of our schedule, provided they're following the NOTAM, which is, I believe it's over 4,000 feet, they can still get into that airspace.
They were flying much lower over other parts of Luna, much lower. But thank you.
Sure.